Welcome back to another episode of Legacy Battle. My co-host tonight from Steelers Nation South is Rollo Cawthon. We have a great interview for you today and a discussion on the movie film Chasing 3000, the story of two brothers trying to get to Roberto Clemente's 3000th hit game. We are joined by the writer and film producer of the film. He's lived it too. Other works include Brewers Boys and Medal of Honor American Heroes. We want to welcome Bill Mikita. Bill, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Excellent. So let's jump into this. Let's start at the beginning. You grew up in Steubenville, Ohio. What
Yes,
made you become a Pirates fan, and how old were you?
I was probably 8 years old. Well, I was about 5 years old, 6 years old. My father went to the 1960 World Series Game 7,
Wow.
and they came back, from that with a with his program, and he bought my brother and I souvenir. And so I've been a Pirate fan my whole life. Uh, my we would go we saw games at Forbes Field, uh, at Three Rivers, and now at PNC Park. So our life, my lifespan, and my brother's lifespan, it's covered all of those fields, and our memories, and just part of who we are.
Well, this is a question I didn't have planned, but was he there for Maz's home run?
Yes,
Oh, wow. Incredible. I
yeah,
have his autograph on a baseball. That's amazing.
that's
Wow.
yeah, that's one of the most interesting games ever, right? What it makes it even more interesting, I don't know if you knew this, but so it's a 10-9 score, right? Not one batter struck out
Oh, wow.
in that
I
game.
didn't know
Not
that.
one. To show you how different the game is today. Not one strikeout that entire game.
Okay.
But
Well,
it was
let's jump in. We're going to be jumping around here a little bit today,
sure.
but 1999, you write the screenplay for Chasing 3000. How long did it take to write? How many drafts were there? And when you got an actor like Ray Liotta to join the film, what were your expectations?
All good questions. So I'll give you try to give you the short answer. So I started writing uh, earlier than that. I started writing really about probably 8 years before that. And um, my mother died after a short illness of a brain tumor, and she was 60, and I was half her age. And I thought, what if half of my life is over? What did I really want to do? And I wanted to write, but I had never expressed it to anyone. And so I had a friend who worked at Disney, and he introduced me to some producers, and one of the producers, said there's two ways to get into the business. One is to be a gopher, start your way up and work your way up. And I'm thinking, well, I'm 30 years old. I've got a pregnant wife and two children. I mean, I hope, the second option is better than that. And he said, well, you have something, and that we want, and we'll pay you for it. So I drove around LA, and I thought, what did I have that no one else had? And I had this very interesting life growing up with a disabled brother who had muscular dystrophy, and we were very close. And he was, even though he had a disability, he was a very dynamic person, um, even as a teenager. And so I, at the time, this is before the internet, I bought books on how to write a screenplay. So I wrote a very autobiographical story about us. And I almost sold it if you're too young to remember, there was something called after school specials. And there were
Oh,
these
I
little,
remember that.
you remember that?
I'm
Mhm.
older than I look. Yeah.
And I almost sold it. So it gave me the confidence to keep writing. And so I kept writing, I kept making contacts and developing, the craft of writing. And then I went back in 1999, I went back to my original story, and I realized, wait a minute, the story really is when my brother and I took this trip to see Roberto Clemente. And once I got that hook, that made the story stronger. And so um, I I showed it to a friend of mine who was a young writer and an actor named Kristen Nunzio. And Chris said the story needs to be bigger, meaning that when I wrote the story, it was maybe too intimate. You'll see those kinds of movies, especially at film festivals, that they're good stories, but they don't have enough broad appeal to get distribution. And so, over uh, a long weekend, the 4th of July weekend, we locked ourselves in a room on Warner Brothers lot, and we rewrote Chasing 3000 and made it this trip across the country. And so it's of course a story about two brothers who take off in this race against time to see Roberto Clements get his 3000th hit. And along the way, the brothers discover the importance of being brothers. And so, as we were talking about before we went on the air, it's a dramatic telling of the story. And people will say, well, what was the real, what was the real trip like? And I'll say, well, if I wanted to tell you that, I would have done a documentary. And so the dramatic telling is, and some of that, what happened to us didn't happen on that 3 days, but it happened to us. So really the story is a condensed kind of life story of us, my brother Stephen and me. And so when I got frustrated because many people liked the story. No one told me they didn't, but I just couldn't get anyone to buy the story. So one day I woke up and I said to my wife, I know people with money. I'm just going to raise the money myself. And so I went to some friends who were finance people, who were hedge fund people, and we were able to raise $700,000. So it was going to be a direct to video, again, a blockbuster reference at the time, a movie, a small movie, but yet my producer friend Ryan Johnson said, we can shoot it for 700,000. 4 days before we started shooting in Pittsburgh, we did not have the lead cast. Earlier, Ryan lived close to a manager friend of his in Marina Del Rey here in LA. And one of the people she managed was Ray Liotta. And so Ryan got the script to her, and 4 days before we started shooting, Ray Liotta committed. And that put us in the stratosphere. We have a great cast. I mean, an incredible cast for such a small movie. I mean, we have Lauren Hawley and Keith David and Seymour Cassell, Emmett Walsh. And but one of the highlights of my life was meeting with Ray the first night, and he flew into Pittsburgh, and we sat down one-on-one, and he told me that the story resonated with him, and he shared with me that he had been adopted as a baby, and that he always kind of carried a chip on his shoulder like Mickey in the story. And he before he flew in, Ryan Johnson, the producer, said, Bill, with A-list actors, one of three things are going to happen when he comes in. Either A, he's just going to go to his room, he's not going to talk to anybody. B, he'll come in with notes, or C, he'll come in and he'll have rewritten all of his parts or all of his scenes, and you'll be up all night rewriting. Well, when he came in, he had notes, and he shared those notes with me. And on at least one scene particularly, he felt that I had him in a scene that was maybe he was going from too many emotions in a short scene, and so I was able to rewrite that to utilize his notes and to help him then as an actor express what he needed to express in the scene. And so it was a great experience. And so with getting Ray Liotta, we were able to then secure another nearly $1.2 million in investments to make the movie. And then we shot the remainder of the movie in LA area, doubling for the boys' trip across the country.
So Roberto Clemente is and was a beloved figure in Pittsburgh. What about him made you his favorite player and made you become a huge fan of his?
Well, all you had to do is watch him play and see the kind of talent that he had, the flair that he had, and for the game, his skill set, um, and just the way he carried himself. He was the best player on the Pirates team, and he was our superstar. So in Pittsburgh, Roberto was our superstar. And as we got older, as we found out, he was just a great man. He I always say that whatever he had decided to go into, whether he was going to be a teacher or a doctor or a businessman, he would have excelled at it and been great at it. He seemed to, and it's interesting. He seemed to project that he was a great person, and then the 1971 World Series kind of sealed that as his showcase of how great he truly was. It's hard for us to believe in this day and age without, we didn't have ESPN, we didn't have Sports Center. There were literally veteran sports writers who were in the American League who had never seen him play, and they told Pittsburgh writers, now we know what you're talking about. And he was a clutch player. He always came up big, and it's interesting. We just saw him for who he was. We didn't see his race. We didn't see his language barrier. We saw nothing except just this great player, and we loved him. And I think most people of my generation feel the same way.
So September 30th, 1972. Tell
Right.
us about the moment, the milestone 3,000th hit, and also your thoughts after the fact, knowing it was his last hit.
Yeah. He has a great, he did the part of the story that, again, that we worked in that we didn't have to dramatize was the night before, that Thursday night. He got an infield hit and they took it away from him. He actually got an infield hit. He went to, he crossed first base, and it flashed hit on the screen up on the scoreboard, and then they took it away from him at home. And that would never happen today. And so, he just brushed it off and said, well, he'll be back at it tomorrow. And the fact that it was this, line drive shot in the gap, and, he tips his hat. It was almost, I don't know, surreal that would be his 3,000th hit off of John Madlack and the Mets. And then they went on to play the Reds, and they lost in the playoffs that year. And then, of course, he died on December 31st of that year, and it was nobody could believe it.
So Chasing 3000 was supposed to be released during the All-Star game in 2006, but it didn't get delayed and released until April 2007. Do you know the reason for the delay, and what was it like having to wait to watch your project be delayed for so long?
Well, that's actually a very good question. I mean, I guess I would answer that by saying I didn't know at the time how difficult it was to make a movie, a Hollywood movie, an independent movie. The great director, filmmaker, Paul Thomas Anderson, has said that it's a miracle any movie gets made. And there are just there's scores of movies that are made that just don't get released, or that something happens. They run out of money. They run into some sort of problem, it's not uncommon. Actually, our goal was to get it released in 2007 as opposed to 2006, but then the market crashed in 2008, and that really hurt Hollywood bad. And it was called P&A money, prints and advertising money for distribution, dried up. And so we weren't the only film that got hurt. In fact, many films went away, but because our film was a period piece, we survived. And so my experience through that, and then getting distribution, I tell young filmmakers, anyone who seeks my advice, that, I'll say making an independent movie is like this. So take the most critical deadline you've ever faced. Then take the most dire financial crisis you've ever encountered. Add those two together and multiply by 10. That's what it's like to make an independent movie. And so it was painful, and it was difficult. And we faced crisis after crisis. And I mean, I was staring into the abyss at personal and financial ruin if we couldn't get this movie made or get it out. And we finally got distribution and got the movie out.
So we see in this film two brothers going across the country, not only building a relationship together as brothers, but becoming men on this trip across the country. So I know that, a large chunk of it is a true story for you. How did this, when this did occur, shape your relationship with your brother? And your brother in the film had muscular dystrophy. I assume he did in real life as well.
Yes, he did. Well, it's like, it is a coming of age story. And our story, our trip was one in which, like a lot of things in life, you bond, and our bonding not only occurred in that 3-day period, but I think one of the most personal scenes in the movie is when the boys are stranded and they're in a mission home or in Alabama, and when Roger says, what if this is the last time we do anything fun? And Mickey says, don't say that. I mean, that was very personal, that happened, and and so it was it's something that you live with when not only the person, my brother, has muscular dystrophy, but as a sibling, you can lose your brother, and and so the fact that we were able to do things before he died, and we experienced so much together as brothers, that story is really a tribute to that.
Good, Rollo.
So in the movie, you guys take some really interesting ways to navigate across the country. In real life, was some of that real? And were you feel for you and your brother's safety, knowing that he had muscular dystrophy?
Yes, I mean, yes and no. I mean, being teenagers, you don't necessarily think about those things, but some of it was dramatic telling of the story. We certainly didn't hop a train, but and there wasn't a beautiful girl in a train. But it's funny because early on, one of my early drafts, I met with a studio executive, Warner Brothers, and he said, "There's no girl in this story. Where's the girl in this story?" And I said, "Well, my mother." The guy doesn't laugh. I said, "That's a joke, But there's certain elements that have to be in the story. But there really was the strangest part is there really was a Chuck Ireland and he actually came to the game with us in real life. And so, there it was. It was really a telling, and some of those things were a dramatic telling of what happened to us during the course of our life, and some of the things that we had to overcome. And so it was again a dramatic telling, really, of our life. My brother Steve and I, what we experienced.
And what
Go ahead.
what brought the idea that we need to take this trip as teenagers to go see Roberto Clemente's 3,000 hit? How did the idea come about? Was it your idea? Was it your brother's idea? How did this idea come to fruition? And what drove you so hard to go see this game?
Well, again, because Roberto was our hero, and it was just something we wanted to experience.
So I understand that you have some new projects you're working on, another baseball project. Tell us about it. Then when can we expect to see it?
Yeah, I think you guys will love this. So what happened is when the movie came out, it was around the time of Facebook, and people would reach out to my brother and me and say, "Hey, are you the Steve Mikita or the Bill Mikita in this movie?" And one morning I woke up and a guy had said, sent me a message and said, I watched your movie and I really loved it. And, I said, well, thank you. Send me a friend request. And then he said, I have a great idea for a movie. Well, some people do, but most people don't. And so he gave me his phone number and I called him, and he said, I played on the greatest high school baseball team of all time. And I said, really? Yeah. He said, we won the LA Championship Municipal League in 1965 during the Watts riots. I said, during the riots? Yeah. The city is burning around you. Yeah. And you played a baseball game. Yeah. I'm in already, right? And so I said, so just out of curiosity, who was on your team? And he said, well, there was Bobby Tolan, Bob Watson, Reggie Smith, Doc Ellis. I said, whoa, time out. All of these future major leaguers were on your team? Yeah. And Dennis Gilbert. I said, Dennis, you mean the Dennis Gilbert who just tried to buy the Los Angeles Dodgers, Dennis Gilbert? Yeah. He's kind of a short white guy. Yeah. So you were an integrated team. Yeah. And I said, and he said, and our coach was this really inspirational guy named Chet Brewer. And he was a father figure to us and kept us out of trouble. He was a former pitcher in the Negro Leagues. And he was just, he meant everything to us. And and also, by the way, our 9-year-old bat boy was Eddie Murray. You mean the greatest switch hitting first baseman of all time? Yeah. He was your bat boy. Yeah. I was blown away. So I did my homework. I found out all these guys lived in South Central Los Angeles. They all grew up together. So I optioned the story, and we just found out, the story just kept getting bigger. And it's remarkable. They said one day we came to practice and a tall, lanky gentleman was showing Doc Ellis how to throw a curveball. It was Satchel Paige. And I said, did you have a team that you had trouble beating? And they said, yes. And I said, who was their pitcher? Raleigh Fingers. And then they said there was this 24-year-old scout from the Dodgers who came to all of our games, Tommy Lasorda. Yeah, Tommy Lasorda. And it's 9 players, 9 major league contracts. I mean, if you had 2 boys in Pittsburgh today on a high school team who got major league contracts, that would be national news, right? 9 players. And Chet Brewer is the greatest baseball guy that no one knows. My theory is, I've shared with people, that right before the influx of all the great Latin players, Southern California was the nexus of the baseball world. Anyone came out of LA. Chet Brewer coached 24 future major leaguers. And it's a remarkable story. And so I wrote the screenplay, and we've raised the money, and we're looking for distribution right now, and trying to get trying to get that movie made. And it's the greatest baseball story that no one knows about.
Wow. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Well, thank you so much for coming on and giving us
You
your
bet.
time, Bill. We appreciate you being here.
Oh, you bet. Thanks guys for having me on.
A reminder, everybody, hit that like, subscribe, notification button. We'll see everyone next time. Everyone have a great night.